Most companies use a traditional recruiting process that is fairly linear. You have processes that drive traffic and take prospective candidates, turn them into applicants, which then go through an interview process and get hired and onboarded. However, the recruiting process is anything but a linear process. Jobs get opened and closed all the time, requirements change, candidates come in and come out of the process at different points, and there's literally hundreds of communication points of failure that could take place along the way. One misstep could be damaging to your consumer brand, your employer brand, and can devastate a candidate experience. Today, we're going to be discussing how to make your end-to-end recruiting processes much more flexible, inclusive, and consistent. And we're going to be starting right now. Today's guest has been described as someone who is equal parts dreamer and pragmatist. He is currently the head of partnerships for AllyO. AllyO Connect provides a single, secure platform for all of your outreach and engagement needs. To tackle additional scaling and efficiency issues, AllyO offers AI solutions for both full cycle recruiting and employee engagement. Please welcome David Bernstein. David, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, and Jeff, thanks. I'm really proud and honored that you would have me on the show today. Thank you.
Awesome. So you guys are based out in California, right? Are you guys getting any of the fires and stuff?
Well, yeah, I can smell the smoke in the air. Yes, it's pretty thick, but yeah.
So I used to live in Pittsburgh, Vallejo, Concord, Walnut Creek area. So I guess that one Carquinez bridge was shut down for a while, right?
All day yesterday, yeah. In Lafayette, people were evacuating.
Scary stuff.
It is.
That stuff, those winds can really kick up right through that Carquinez Strait and just causes a firebomb if you got a fire right now.
I used to live out in Hercules, and the wind was up in the afternoon. So yeah, definitely know what you're talking about.
You can't leave your umbrellas up at all out there.
Right. Absolutely.
So I used to live right by the Pittsburgh Railroads, the BART station right there. In previous episodes of the Speaker Agenda Show, I've spoken about how ATSs and CRMs have just not been able to keep up technologically with some of the advances in real-time communications, right? So they're good at, hey, they can send a status update when a job is closed or you're rejecting a candidate, but some of those more complex communications are not being held very well or handled very well by the ATS and CRM. How can AllyO handle some of those communications better?
Yeah, I think it boils down to the simple fact that AllyO is really, we look, act, and talk like a human does, right? And I think that's the key difference between what AllyO is providing and what the system of record approach does, right? Those are typically more forms based. They're, the data that they require, there's a whole lot of data they're trying to capture in one go. AllyO tries to, does the conversation. It manages it more like two people were talking, just like you and I today, Jeff, right? It's more natural in the flow. And that's really what we're finding is by just having dialogue and really treating it as a dialogue is that it's much more effective and it's pleasant, it's easier, it's quicker, right? There's a bunch of things that then come down the pike as a result of just making it just conversational.
And it seems more personal even though it's held by an AI, right? It seems more personal.
It's definitely, anyway, it's interesting just to kind of watch at the end when people say thank you, right?
Right? To a computer.
Right? To the computer, right? They're fully aware that they're talking to the machine. And yet at the end of it, there's this thank you message and definitely seems to me at least an indication of trust, right? That they felt like they were taken care of. And a natural human response when you feel like you were helped in a conversation is to say thank you. So it's kind of interesting that mirrors in the machine to person to machine conversations as well.
Tilt your camera angle down just a little bit more. We're going to a little bit more, tiny bit.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Nope, too much. Don't want to chop off your head.
Okay.
That's perfect. All right. So I saw on your website that a lot of different types of organizations could be implementing these types of communication platforms, right? Is this more for the small organization, maybe doing 50 or 100 hires a year? Is it more for enterprise, for companies doing 1,000 hires a year? Where in that continuum does AllyO stand?
Well, I mean, to be effective cost-wise, right? You need to have something, you need to have a substantive enough volume that you want to automate,
Right.
right? And because I think what happens today is that, if it's just a couple of jobs, you're able to handle that kind of on your own. At a certain point, you start to need more and more people to do something that, maybe it's still work you wouldn't want to do. I mean, AllyO applies across the board, even if you're only doing 5 hires, right? The work of recruiting includes a lot of work, some of which is not actual recruiting, right?
Right.
So having an AllyO involved in the process is always a nice to have, but realistically, when you start to get to that point where you bring more people on to be able to manage all that administration, then that's the sense, that's the place where it makes sense to start thinking about having a digital worker now be able to come on your team and join and scale with you and be able to take on more and more of that work. I like to
What
say,
kind of functionality is the AI able to take over? I mean, there's a lot of, fear mongering in the system right now where, oh, it's going to take over the recruiters' jobs and stuff like that. But that's not really the case, right? AllyO is really taking over specific aspects of the recruiting process and just making it more efficient, right? So, what kinds of steps in that recruiting process is AllyO taking over?
right. So I like to say, you can relegate work to AllyO so you can delegate more of the time that people would normally need to do actual recruiting, right? That relegate, delegate. So AllyO takes on all that administrative work. Again, I think I was saying earlier, uh, there's a whole lot of work that gets done in talent acquisition, some of which is actually recruiting, right?
Right.
And then there's
About
all the
10%.
right, and in today's world, unfortunately, right, as by virtue of all this kind of belief, I think, at least, that all these productivity tools have led to a place where we've now expect recruiters to be able to pull all these tools together and suddenly be more productive. And now we then raise the bar and expect them to carry 30, 40 recs and, be able to have conversation effectively with hiring managers and candidates, 400 people a day. It's just not tenable, right? So
Right.
people run around, they end up having conversation with, it's a heat kind of moment of squeaky wheel, and they right? Instead, you can get Ally to kind of join the team to be able to manage all of that effectively so that you can have more capacity to be able to have the conversations, right? And be able to understand the people. And, look, a lot of recruiting has sales like features to it, right? We're trying to convince someone to get out of one seat and come to another. But there's that goes with that is empathy and understanding what drives someone's desire to want to do that, and how do you get them to be excited to want to come on and join that vision and be a productive member of the new team, right? There's what will it take to get them to move, if it's this relo might be, or there's compensation. There's so many aspects, right? That's not the place where AllyO's playing, right?
Right.
That's clearly the place where people need to converse and connect. Do I understand you and your goals, and what's your culture fit, and
But
what
by
are you
implementing
looking for?
something like AllyO, it'll give the recruiter more time to do those types of or having those types of
Well,
conversations.
that's the goal, right? How do we create capacity so you're not overburdened by doing things like chasing people down, trying to hunt them for their resumes, get things scheduled. It's all of that administration, transactional work. I think of it as it's routine. It's usually linear in nature, and that's the work that's perfect for AllyO.
So any size company, but obviously it slants a little bit more towards the enterprise organizations. The more volume hiring you're doing, the more candidates you're talking about, the more capacity the recruiters can take on because you're automating or relegating a lot of those tasks to the AI.
Mhm.
How can this bad communication and candidate experience for companies that are not automating, how can that really damage their either employer brand, their consumer brand? Have you seen any kind of data that shows that if you provide a poor candidate experience, this translates into a, 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 a poorer or lessened recruiting brand or employer brand or consumer brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the talent board has done some great work in that area, right? There's that they have a nice calculator on their site that actually, especially if you are in the consumer facing space, right? Um, so one of the things with Ally, one of the expressions I often use is that no candidate left behind, right? I,
Hmm.
I am so tired, Jeff. I imagine you are as well, of hearing about the black hole. It's inexcusable. It seems like
Right.
in this day and age. Um, my first job in HR, I was managing our recruiting operations team at an HR technology company. I had a group of people that worked with me. We spent uh, every whatever this dedicated team back in the day, that the cool technology then was scanning,
Yeah.
right? So we
OCR.
right, so OCR, right? So before there was an internet and an email, we were running Sunday ads, and we had the fax machine, right?
Yep.
And we come in on Monday mornings, and we scoop up all the curly paper and scan it. Wednesday came, there was all the snail mail that was flattened and put on the flatbed, and that was scanned. And by Friday afternoon, we sent a thank you note to every candidate globally who sent a resume to us that said, "Thanks, we appreciate your interest in us. We got your resume. Here's the next step in the process." Right? That was 25 years ago, right? So to me, to hear today that there's still the black hole, that people are not hearing about things, is just unfathomable. But definitely one of the things that AllyO supports is this ability to have a personal outreach to say thanks to every candidate and let them know, and be able to kind of then actually we're able to do one step further, which is greet you, get you screened. If there's any assessments, take you through the assessment cycle, be able to get you scheduled right on the spot and be able to take it all the way through,
And
right?
it's not just a one and done like email communications, which is what CRM or ATS is going to be. Hey, thanks for your application. Then you still don't, you never hear from them again, right? Until the rec is closed, and then you get your rejection letter. Is there ongoing communication saying, hey, this is what your status is in the queue, or the hiring managers evaluating other candidates at this time? What kind of other
Yeah,
follow-up status
sure.
updates
It's
are
hey Jeff, by the way, today's your interview. Will you be able to make it?
there?
And
Okay.
if you're not, for example, you can reschedule yourself. Similarly, hey Jeff, how did the interview go? Are you still interested? Right? How's it, right? And so that ability to kind of gauge and check in with candidates throughout the life cycle, not just kind of from the very top of funnel, that's really powerful, right? And
I'm
so,
sure you could also use this for some employee engagement as well, get some hiring manager feedback, satisfaction surveys, things like that as well, right?
oh, absolutely. So yes, AllyO has actually, now we've extended the platform to be able to support into the all the stakeholders in the process, as you're saying, on the talent acquisition flow, but also then how do we work with the employees now that you're onboarded. And so you've gotten to know AllyO as a candidate, and now it's a familiar, I'll say air quotes, face for you to kind of engage with now. AllyO's checking in with you. How's it going? What's it like now to work there? AllyO check in with you around your interest in your career development, right? And kind of help you, kind of get connected to mentors or new opportunities, kind of think about growing your skills. There's AllyO throughout your worker life cycle.
So I went to HR Tech last year. I was unable to make it this year, but last
Mhm.
year you walked around and pretty much every booth had AI plastered on it somewhere, right?
Sure.
So AI this, and it was AI onboarding and stack ranking and searching and blah blah blah. So AI is on everything. What aspects of the AllyO platform are actually controlled by AI, and how deep does it go?
Right. So think of us as conversational AI. That's
Okay.
the primary place where the AI is paramount. Um, and so that kind of natural language processing and understanding, right? So to really get to understand the intent of what someone's saying, and then be able to then provide an appropriate response back, right? That's where we're putting a heavy amount of our R&D into really kind of driving, a more natural conversational experience.
So being able to contextualize what information they're receiving from that candidate, what they're looking for, contextualize it, and then it responds back to you appropriately.
Absolutely. You can say to
Okay.
AllyO, I'd like to work in New York City. In fact, I have, several of our customers are doing that right now, where you can actually not just type, but you can actually speak to AllyO and be able to say, I'd like to work in New York City, and comes back with all the jobs that employer has in that area, for example.
Okay.
Be able to, help them through the process.
So there's been a lot of, you know, bad press in the media about how AI has injected unconscious bias into the recruiting process. Do you think that existing recruiting process, by and large, not necessarily any specific employer, but do you think it's fair across most candidate pools for when they apply to a job? Are they being considered fairly?
In the non-AI world, even
Yeah,
as we speak, right? I mean,
either
this is
or.
happening all day. I mean, one of the things that we see in the implementation, for example, right? You have two or more recruiters recruiting for a similar type of role, right? AllyO can now take over front loading the screening experience, right? How do you what should AllyO do in that point, right? So now you've got two recruiters who each think they understand the best way to screen for that role, right? You got to harmonize that, right? And so it creates a conversation where the employer now is consciously working on removing the unconscious bias, right? They sit down together and they collaborate and say, this is the way, right? That we purposely want to be able to teach AllyO to be able to then have that conversation, right? So it, those black box algorithms that then kind of stack rank, and that are based on, whatever the data was that led for the training, that's a different type of AI than AllyO is about,
Okay.
right? What we're doing is a, again, it's conversational AI to the end, so we're training based on what we're seeing in conversation types, and when someone says absolutely, that's another way of giving a yes, for example, right? And how does AllyO then understand what people are saying and be able to then continue the dialogue flow without getting hung up and seeming more mechanical, right? But
So I assume you could use this for, I mean, the original use case that you just mentioned right there was for more or less a job alert, right? Or a job search type application. You could use this in onboarding of candidates if they have, or new hires if they have questions about, hey, how do I find my healthcare? Is that an application also, not just during the recruiting process, but also onboarding or even employee process?
if you're not careful, I'm going to recruit you to work on our
Okay.
marketing.
I haven't seen this platform yet, so I
Yeah.
have a lot of questions about how it actually works. So
Well, yeah, no, I mean, you're definitely onto it, right? And so at the core of what AllyO does, right, it's a conversational experience on the front end where we're taking unstructured data that we call conversation. But how do we then understand the intent of that, be able to structure that data? How do we then manage that into, when needed, into data entry, right, through our deep integration and manage workflow orchestration and create analytics? Um, that's really the core. And so much, well, and then the other thing that we do is event scheduling. So if you really kind of blend everything that I just said, including the event scheduling, so much of the is mired in administration steps that incorporate, two or more of those activities, right? Of needing to be able to capture data or be able to provide information that we can relay back out, be able to kind of get key data entered into systems and move it through the process, be able to create analytics and be able to do the scheduling, right? There's so many different things that need to be scheduled or data captured and reminded and keep the flow going, right? What if you had a superhuman team member that could work 24 hours a day that joins you to be able to do that in a consistent process across the board, right?
yeah, I'm just using Bookify right now, and it has been so much easier saying, look, just book a time, and if they need to cancel, they can do it right on the system. If they need to reschedule, they can reschedule themselves. I'm assuming it's got a lot of those features built into the AllyO platform, right?
Right. Except though, imagine now it's conversational. So
Right.
you get a hey Jeff, how you doing today? Will you be able to make let's say it's a phone screen. So interview is coming up. Will you be able to keep the interview, right? And if not, would you like to reschedule? And can I provide you new times? Right? Much more conversation, but definitely the same idea, right?
So if you look at the traditional recruiting process, it's very linear, right? This potentially could complexify that recruiting plus process if you're not careful. Because right now you've got candidates coming in at certain points, you're leaving at certain points, say, I'm not interested anymore, you took too long or whatever. How do you manage a more complex recruiting process that is still very much a linear? You identify candidates to drive traffic, and then they go through, become prospective candidates, and then they apply to a job, and then they become a new hire, or a
Mhm.
job offer and then a hire and then onboarding. That's a fairly linear, but now you're adding some additional layers in there. How do you manage that? Or is it possible to print out a new process map that shows all these tangents?
It actually would be great if customers actually came to the table with that transformed process in mind. But I think as we're so early still in the adoption of what these technologies can do, that what's a great place that I see most customers starting is they take an as-is process, something that's well understood, very linear, as you said, right? And then they map it out now if they were to now assign an AllyO team member to kind of now own something, right? And so as part of the implementation, what we're going to learn is what is that customer's workflow, right? What are the steps? What are the order of those steps? And who's the owner of each of those steps? And as we see data come in, so Jeff, we pull the data through the API from a system of record, from the ATS into the AllyO platform, right? Through the automation, we're going to be able to see, oh, here's Jeff, he's at this step. That's a step that AllyO owns. What do we do when we're the identified owner? What do we say? And where do we go next with that? Where does the data go that we've now captured? And who's the next person we need to kind of move the process flow to, right? It is very linear, as I said. And so AllyO becomes a team member. You've hired AllyO. We teach AllyO to then understand each customer's workflow process and how to see that in the data. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, when I was at IBM, what I used to do is we called it funnels, right? So each one of the steps, if you will, had a specific funnel, and then you had a person responsible. So there would be an onboarding funnel, and these are the steps that took place. You would have a traffic funnel, so driving candidate traffic. If you had a career webinar funnel or a video voicemail landing page funnel, all those were funnels that would lead it to a candidate experience was a lot more engaging, right? Which is what you're talking about. You're just using different terminology.
Right. So yeah, it's almost the RACI format as well. Do you know that framework for
Yeah.
RACI?
Yep.
Yeah. So where is the R for AllyO is the R for what steps, right? And so when you hire AllyO, we want to look, act, and talk like be a team member of the
For the
customer.
audience that doesn't know what RACI is, please take
Uh,
10 seconds to explain that.
Responsible, accountable, communicated, and informed, right?
Right.
Uh, Consulted and informed, right? But how do we? So when you map out a process flow, you identify all the key stakeholders in a process flow. But the key thing that we're trying to, you and I are zeroing in on here is who's the R? Who's the responsible party for something? And if by the way, AllyO needs to consult or inform anybody too, then we can do data passing, right? We can, pass the message over to somebody. But, the key thing is when we're the R, when we're the responsible party, right? We see that in the data because we can identify a candidate as a particular step, then it's our turn to engage. What do we do, right? And so you can have personalized conversation at scale with every candidate, every step of the way, right? And know what is the right thing to say to that candidate based on that part of the process.
So
Yeah.
I've been reading a couple articles, and it's probably just headlines and clickbaity type stuff, but they're saying that Gen X, which is what I am, and then millennials and Gen Zers are acting differently to AI and various other technologies differently than so each generation has a little bit more acceptance, which kind of makes sense. But on one hand, these are fairly forced processes, right? When you go to a website, either you have the option to interact or you don't have the option to interact, right? So are you seeing a generational difference or a difference in how the different generations react or interact with the technology?
I don't see that as much.
I
I
don't
think,
see it
yeah,
either.
yeah. I think what's happening is as people become acclimated to their consumer life and the experience that you go through, you then naturally either expect or wonder when you're going to start seeing it in your work life experience as well, right? And that's often been the case, right? Marketers who are using technologies and consumer facing, right? And HR has often kind of been the second in or next in line in the enterprise on leveraging the similar technologies that marketing has learned is proven. I think we're seeing some of the same things happen here, right? This consumer facing technology to be able to have nice conversation, easy, effective. The other thing, Jeff, we didn't touch on, but over 50% on a regular basis of the engagement with AllyO is after hours, right?
Hmm.
After 5 p.m., before 9 a.m., and on the weekends. And the data regularly shows, so that ability to have right? In this case, right, working people are busy by definition, right? Recruiters spend a ton of time trying to chase down busy people. Well, what if those busy people could have an asynchronous ability to get back when it's good and convenient for them, and someone could still pick up with them and have a good conversation and be able to continue the process, right?
Yeah,
Again, simple,
traditionally you'd have to have like a scheduling coordinator work between like 4 p.m. and 11 p.m. just to be able to get in contact with the candidates. They weren't working during the day, right? Not
yes.
not if you want to get in contact with a candidate.
Or on weekends, you're right. And so
Yeah.
what do you do? And so suddenly you've now got a whole set of, a new way to kind of think about your service delivery, right? It just kind of changes the whole way you're thinking. So back to what I was saying, we've got folks who start with us automating an as is process. Um, but then as they begin to work with AllyO, right, the aha moments go off. And that's
Mm.
where we start to get into these, oh, I could do it this way, or what else could you do for me as well? I mean, the AllyO core competencies allow our customers to also build customized workflows that are not maybe from our delivered solution set as well. So they can, everything with AllyO is modular and configurable and moldable. So again, we want to be that team member that, the phrase I often use, you now said a couple of times, we want to look, act, and talk like the customer that's procuring AllyO, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the frameworks that I can reference this back to is in the RPO days that I had. We were always constantly handing stuff back between the RPO recruiter and potentially an on-site recruiter or an on-site hiring manager, something like that. So there had to be very clear recruiting processes defined and a process map so that we knew where our responsibility started and ended, right? I
Mhm.
assume the same thing is happening with AllyO, but it's a lot more automated than what we were doing inside of an RPO.
Right. So definitely, and
Awesome.
so and keep things going 24 hours a day, and um, you know, the they
We have people in the Philippines and
oh
Europe
yeah,
and
on low cost
Singapore to do all that
right?
stuff.
Yeah. So one of the, the powerful features of Valio that's not necessarily a feature sold as a standalone, but inherent in the product is this something that I often refer to as the e-nagging, right? But the nudge, right?
Yeah,
Right? So listening for cues on when something needs to get done and is it getting done, and being able to be that digital agent, that digital worker on your team that can understand that and know when someone needs to be nudged, right? And be able to provide that.
triggers,
Yeah,
actions, follow-up sequences. If
all
you
the
don't
time.
have those clearly defined in your recruiting process, you don't have a very good recruiting process. I can tell you that right now.
And so,
Trigger is when this happens,
right,
something else happens, right? And that's an action. And then here's the follow-up sequence to that action. Once they take the action, here's what comes next. If you don't have that clearly defined, you don't have
right.
you're not dealing with automation or at least a very
Right?
good
And then
recruiting
when you do
process.
have that, imagine trying to execute on that in a
At
non,
scale is massively
yeah.
difficult.
And so what happens, right? And so you,
Maintain
yeah,
consistency across, we were dealing, some of our clients had 50, 100, 150, 200 recruiters. To manage that at scale in different regions of the world or in different languages, 90 different countries, 28 different, it was complex beyond belief. So yeah, I
right.
could definitely see how this would be
Oh,
helpful.
right. And I will say back in the old days, right, we did that with people, right? We would
Yeah,
have to, and because we
throw
had,
people at it.
there was
Yep.
no other problem, right? No other way, to solve that problem. And today, there now is this new alternative. And that's what's exciting, is to be able to, start to tell that story and help folks to understand how they can leverage this digital worker, as a member of their team. The other powerful thing that, we're also finding kind of really catching fire with AllyO is that we also believe that clearly that there is a place for, for people to people communication. And so how do we foster that as well? With some live communication channels. We have both SMS live texting capability as well as video. And so you have that ability to kind of let AllyO kind of front end, back to my comment on relegate. How do you relegate all that kind of front end sifting and sorting and, weeding through the groupings, and what you end up with is a higher percentage of quality conversations on your calendar, right? You walk in, you've got interested and interesting people, right, who've been vetted and are ready to speak to you, right? whether those were passive candidates that you outsourced the engagement conversation to AllyO, so to speak, and AllyO ran with that and talked to a whole bunch of passive candidates and pulled them in, or these are active incoming candidates who've expressed interest, but will you find them interesting, and can AllyO do that filtering, right? Either way, AllyO can support that very front end of the process so that you don't have to spend the first 20 minutes of a 30-minute call finding out if they're just even in the zone, right? You know, it's a game.
Yeah, it's I remember grounding and pounding on that phone, just 50, 100 phone calls a day.
Right.
It can wear on. That's such a high turnover rate in recruiting that I think that could definitely help solve some of those problems right there.
Yeah, I mean, who went into recruiting to do that, right? I mean, the whole
Yep,
goal is to have more meaningful dialogue. And
yep,
really, again, so this is a form, of AI. It's conversational AI, but I think the goal always is how do we help? The goal of any AI, I think, should be always about trying to get people to do more meaningful work,
yep.
right? And so that's right. There's a whole lot. Go back to there's a whole lot of work that happens in recruiting, some of which is actual recruiting, right? And then there's all this other stuff that holds people down from getting to do the more meaningful work, right? Create that capacity, get folks back to the meaningful parts of the job, right? And higher
All right,
value. Yeah.
David, thank you so much. It's absolutely fast. I just kind of love any kind of automation. This is kind of my AI month, if you will. I've had a couple other AI providers on this month, and this was an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for being on.
My
Any
pleasure.
last words? What didn't we? We still have the after hour show. Don't forget that. But any last words?
Uh, Check us out. But yeah,
Okay.
it's game changing, right? The sky is the limit on how you can apply this technology into supporting your processes. So again, thanks Jeff for the time to be able to talk about that with your show.
Quite welcome. Anybody, if you're interested in learning more about AllyO and the entire internal, external communication process and the platform that they're offering, you can go to the AllyO website. I'll put a link down in the description, and you can schedule a demo right on their site. It's very easy. I'm going to be doing that as soon as we're done our call because I definitely want to see this platform. Thank you, everybody. Make it a great day. Stick around for the after hours show. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Many people may not know that I was actually an art major in college studying graphic design and photography. And while I'm no longer a professional photographer, I still wanted to support my professional artist friends. And as a way of paying it forward to my artist friends, every so often I'm going to be featuring a piece of artwork in my background. This week's piece is from a high school friend that I used to wrestle with, and he's based out of Lahaina, Hawaii now. You can find more information on Matthew's work on Facebook. I'll put a link in the description, but you can also search Matthew Long Artwork and his site will pull up. Go check out his stuff. It's absolutely awesome, and feel free to support his work. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Speaker Agenda Show. We've got some more great conversations coming up in future episodes. We've got Leah Daniels from Appcast, and we're going to be discussing programmatic advertising. We also have Michael Bagelman from Claro discussing HR data analytics, workforce planning, and a lot of other fun stuff. Don't forget, this is a video and a podcast. So if you want to change formats and either watch or listen, you can go to speakeragenda.com and just switch up your formats, no problem. All right, everybody. Peace out. Make it a great day.